Oh, hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show. It's the 13th of September, 2019, 7:04 Eastern Time. A couple of minutes, a little bit late start. My colleague, Joe Rayo, will be joining me shortly because, after all, he has to make an entrance. And he will do so. You might hear the door slam as he comes into the room. No, PJ weather. I'm not tired at all. It's been a standard 5-day week, and actually it's going to be a 6-day work week for me tomorrow because I'm going to be working tomorrow night at WPIX TV in New York City. So if you're not in New York City, you can always go to pix11.com because they do put the weathercast up there on the website, and you could watch it there. So we are dealing with Tropical Depression 9, which formed from potential Tropical Cyclone 9, just as the reconnaissance aircraft was leaving the area today. The Hurricane Center was able to close off a weak center, and we can see it on the satellite. And I think there is a plane on its way there now. I'm guessing that they probably won't have enough data until maybe for the 11 o'clock advisory. I think the 8 o'clock advisory will probably just carry it the same. The outlook going forward, a couple of interesting things that we're seeing here. First off, a lot of what's going on, and you'll see it on the satellite in a moment, is east of the center. So that at least keeps, at least for now, keeps the heavy convection away from the northwest Bahamas, where we have tropical storm warnings up, and there's still tropical storm watches up for the Florida East Coast. One of the things that's going to be important here early on is how strong does it get? If it strengthens only slowly, it may wind up getting more westward before it turns northward. If it starts to wrap up a bit and begins to intensify a bit faster, and I would kind of argue against that at this point, then you'll probably see it turn more toward the north. The fact that the center seems to have reformed a little further east has basically adjusted all the weather models a little bit further east, and the forecast from the Hurricane Center has been adjusted well to the east. So right now, I would say that it's not a serious threat to Florida or the southeast coast of the United States, but those watches are up just in case we get a bit more of a westward drift here before it starts to edge more toward the north. Maybe down the road, if the track works out according to what some of the models are showing, this could be a very close pass for Bermuda next week. So we'll take a look at all of that in just a second. Meanwhile, we had a gorgeous day here. I mean, it was just absolutely terrific. We had temperatures that in many places didn't even get out of the 60s. We had a good deal of sunshine happening, and that was a big positive. I love these days in September when it gets like this, and all it takes is a northeast wind and a high to the north, a little bit of an onshore flow, and that dry air from New England comes down, and we wind up having some really great weather. So here's a wide satellite view. The clouds that you see in the Gulf of Mexico, that is a strong upper low going way up into the atmosphere, and we've been talking about that with reference to the disturbed weather that was east of Florida, now Tropical Depression 9, because that was producing strong wind shear. But what's happened is the upper low on schedule has been drifting to the west, and as a result, the upper air winds at least have relaxed enough. They're still there. You can see the clouds moving southeast from southwest to northeast across Cuba. There is some shear going on over this, but the winds have relaxed enough that the system has begun to develop. And speaking of developing, we have our development here as our Mr. Rayo has walked into the room.
It almost sounds like an old radio or TV show. Remember Our Miss Brooks?
Also, our Mr. Rayo.
Our Mr. Rayo.
Oh, okay. At least it's not like the Tallulah Bankhead's radio show, which was called The Big Show.
The Big Show, that's right.
So I was just telling the folks we had today. I love days like this in September.
Yes.
They're beautiful. The air has that nice, cool, crisp feel to it. Slept with the window open last night and woke up wrapped up like a sausage in bed this morning, so it was pretty good. But we're gonna see some changes. The good thing about this pattern, Joe, is that we are getting these fronts coming through every couple of days. And that at least keeps it from getting too warm for too long.
Right, and this weekend, anybody have any plans this weekend? You can probably put a big red circle around Sunday as the better of the 2 weekend days. Tomorrow looks kind of cloudy-ish. Maybe after 3 or 4 o'clock we'll have a couple of showers. Nothing that we couldn't handle if it rains where you are.
In many places it won't. And then I threw in a chance maybe of an overnight shower or thunderstorm early Sunday morning,
right,
as that little upper trough goes by, or whatever you want to call it. And then it's warm and somewhat humid, I guess, for Sunday and Monday.
You know, I heard some forecasts saying that it would be less humid on Sunday. I couldn't understand that. I think the dew points will probably be hovering within a few degrees of 60.
Yeah,
that's somewhat muggy.
It's somewhat. It's not going to be oppressive. No, not at all. It's hard for it to get oppressive this time of year. If you're driving dew points up well into the 60s to near 70 this time of year, it's not like July. It's usually where we've got a lot of clouds and some kind of front approaching, and the risk for showers. I can't really recall a day where we've gotten some mid to late September heat where it gets up to 90 and the dew point's up at 70 or 72 or 3.
And the nice thing about all of this is that once we sweep whatever shower activity we have tomorrow late or tomorrow night out, it looks like we're going to be dry, high and dry, at least from my opinion, Sunday all the way out through all of next week.
Yep, I totally agree. And another cold front goes by Monday. Another big high builds up to the north. We get an onshore flow, and that should be it for next week. All right, severe weather-wise tonight, just really fast pointing out that we've got a shrinking severe thunderstorm watch up for parts of northern Ohio and southeastern Michigan. There's a little slight risk there from SPC, and a small area of marginal risk in interior South Carolina and western North Carolina. We've got a few scattered cells on the radar there. But you can see from Virginia on up into New England, it's a shower-free day, at least in the eastern half of that.
Right.
The west is quiet. The western lakes down in the middle Mississippi Valley, quiet. Swath there across the Gulf states. A little action in Florida, which is not a surprise. And of course, when it comes to severe weather, if you're watching this later on a replay, it's dated. So where do you go for your latest weather information? Weather.gov, to your local National Weather Service office. Okay, so let's just switch gears, and how about we go to potential tropical cyclone Nayan.
Yes.
And the first thing, Joe, I want to bring up is this water vapor imagery, because the one thing that has played out quite well today from yesterday was the anticipation of this. Whoops. Well, I almost drew it perfectly. It was left over from yesterday.
Are you doing your winky dink?
Yes,
on the screen again?
Exactly. Yeah. How many kids got in trouble for ruining their television sets with that? So this upper low, which goes way up in the atmosphere, was producing strong winds over our now tropical depression, but the winds have relaxed because that upper low, which was in the northeast Gulf yesterday, has now moved into the central Gulf. So that has created a much more favorable environment for this depression to develop.
You remember we were watching a storm in the Gulf during the development of Dorian. Remember that? We were
yes.
Slowly but surely.
And that went way to the, that feature, which was also a cold upper low, wound up moving well to the west, and that played a big role in the rapid intensification, because the outflow pattern from it was very strong over Florida, and Dorian had that as part of its equation essentially, and it wound up getting to that Category 5 status as it approached the Bahamas. By the way, you can see our dry air in the east is beginning to pull out. You have this weather system here that is moving eastward. it's sort of like a front, but it really isn't. It's more of a, I don't know, a trough that's moving through,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the air behind it is actually going to be warmer than the air ahead of it.
I had on my evening weather spoke about not one but two systems. One, a warm front that will be the trigger for tomorrow afternoon showers, and then this, whatever you want to call it, a cold front or an upper trough or whatever, that moves through tomorrow night with maybe a grumble or two of thunder and a couple of showers. But that's out of here by Sunday morning, and it looks like, again, we're on a protracted long-range spell of dry, fine weather Sunday and right on through much of next week.
Now, I've pulled the visible up on Tropical Depression Nayan, and let me center this so everybody can see it quite well. By the way, if you want to find these, if you just go to the Go satellite page and click on storms, it will be right there. You see on the top on the menu. If you click on storms, it'll bring you to this page, and you can pull all the available loops up. If you look carefully, you can actually see the western part of that low-level center develop midway through, and the clouds that are swinging around from. Let me bring my little pencil thing back here. But right in here, right there. That's where it looks like there's a low-level center, and you can see the clouds just rotating. Those thin clouds, they're rotating in a counterclockwise fashion. Of course, once the visible's gone, you can't really see it that well. But this is the point where the Hurricane Center said, okay, we've got a depression. The old reconnaissance, the afternoon reconnaissance aircraft, the strongest wind that I saw was somewhere between 20 and 30 knots. So it's not quite there yet,
Right.
As far as close to becoming a tropical storm. But as long as those upper air winds continue to relax and that upper low moves to the west, this should probably get the tropical storm status on Saturday.
Do you want me to add anything to that?
Please, by all means.
I mean, you've explained it so beautifully. There's not much more for me to, add.
Well, thank you. I left you speechless.
Yeah.
By the way, we got the warnings up for the northwestern Bahamas. There's not a whole lot of weather going on there. We've been getting these bands that have been breaking off and moving westward. I'll bring up the Miami radar, and we'll be able to see it. But other than these bands, and sometimes when you have these tropical systems, you may have these warnings up or these watches up, and then you're getting weather that you might typically get on a given day in that part of the world in the late summer, early fall, and you wouldn't even know the difference.
As I said with Dorian, when Dorian came northward and brought a few showers up here, I think it was a week ago.
Right.
And I said, if it weren't for the fact that it had a name, you'd just say, oh, it's a cloudy, showery kind of afternoon. Has a name, it's Dorian. Oh, it's Dorian. Oh, well, it's
exactly.
It's weird. It's weird, this world that we live in.
Good. We do have a radar. We can take the Southeast Regional radar. So you see there's these bands that are getting thrown back westward over Florida. They're coming in from the east and then moving off the west coast. But there's nothing here that's really exceptional. Looks like some strong storms tonight in parts of South Carolina. That's that marginal risk that the Storm Prediction Center had, and also into a portion of western North Carolina. And they're moving southwestward, which is around the periphery of the upper high.
Right.
Part of the upper high that sticks out there is pushing them southwest.
It's almost as if the high is flexing its muscles, strengthening a little bit as it pulls away, and as it does, it's, as you just pointed out, pushing the shower shield down and away to the left or to the west.
Well, here's the Hurricane Center's forecast. Now they because they relocated the center further east, looks like they've nudged the forecast a little bit further to the east. And I said at the beginning before you walked in, depending on two things. One is I was suggesting that if it for some reason takes its time strengthening, that might make it go a little bit more to the west before it makes a turn. If it strengthens a little faster, it'll probably may turn a bit faster. Mm-hmm. I think the bottom line here, Joe, is that this really does kind of stay offshore all the way through. And if it becomes a hurricane, which a lot of the global models say it will, it might make a pass very close to Bermuda later next week.
Yeah,
And they get their share of storms every so often.
it's amazing. It's just one tiny little speck of land, or actually specks of land. There's more than one island associated with it, and yet it always seems that hurricanes kind of and tropical cyclones gravitate to that particular region of the Atlantic Ocean, the Sargasso Sea.
Yes.
Yes.
There's two. Both of you and I have been to Bermuda. Beautiful. If you've never been to Bermuda, any place that you have to pay to get out, you should go to, because when you're standing there waiting to pay the airport tax to leave, you will have second and third thoughts.
Well, you see, you and I have been to Bermuda, but we've both gone in different ways. I mean, the only times I've gone, and I've been there 3 times now, most recently this past June, I always have gone on a cruise ship. You, on the other hand,
I swam.
will never. You say,
Yeah, no, I don't do boats.
Yeah.
I mean, I do boats if I know that where I'm going, the water is relatively reasonable. I do not do open ocean.
But you know that the area, the region right around Bermuda, is called the Sargasso Sea, and that's a seaweed. And
Right.
in fact, for about a day or so, as we're sailing toward Bermuda and away from it in that area, you actually see that seaweed. It looks like big brown seaweed.
And there's actually a species of fish
Yes.
and I forgot the name of it, but I saw it on the I was watching a BBC animal series called The Hunt, which was about predators, and it all on land, on sea, and they talked about this one particular species of fish that looks exactly like the weed,
exactly.
and lives in the weed, doesn't really
Right.
swim very much at all. It waits for the prey to come to it,
Right.
and then it just got, and it does. It's like, other than the eyes, it gets totally lost.
And it's amazing. It's indigenous. To that area right around Bermuda. You will not find this type of seaweed anywhere else in the Atlantic Ocean.
Nope.
But it's right there, and that's why they call it the Sargasso Sea.
The depression is, as of the 5 o'clock advisory, at 25,675 west, and that's a little over 200 miles east of Freeport, and probably a little bit over 300 miles east of Palm Beach. Top winds are 30, so it's on the. Usually, when they make these systems depressions, the winds are the listed winds are at 35, but this one's at 30, moving northwest at 8, and you can see the track by 2 p.m. Wednesday. And the European, the GFS, the global models, the hurricane models, they all were very, very much the
Robust.
same. And also in terms of depth. Now, that's another thing. Once it gets out here, once it gets east of the North Carolina coast, if there was some upwelling issues with Dorian, a lot of that water has come back temperature-wise. But once you get far enough east of the Carolinas, the water there is very warm and wasn't upwelled nearly as much.
Right.
So this thing could wind up deepening quite a bit as it approaches Bermuda. There's 2 things about Bermuda that I recall from the standpoint of hurricanes. I can't remember the year, but there was one year in this century that we live in now that Bermuda had. I think there were 4 hurricanes that passed inside of 100 miles of Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one, was it Gonzalo? I don't remember what year it was, sometime in the last 10 years maybe, that went over the island.
Mm-hmm.
And they show it was a category 3. And after it passed, and you saw some of the videos, and you saw the damage that was caused, and it was pretty extensive. And then I think they showed you pictures of Bermuda a couple of weeks later. You would never have known that there was everything was fixed, clean, done, and yeah, they just got to business. They cleaned it up. Bermuda's British. It's I believe it's still part of the British Commonwealth. And I got arrested in Bermuda as a 14-year-old for wearing a T-shirt without sleeves.
Really?
In Hamilton. It was against the law. I was accused of being part of some Coney Island gang. It is funny. Okay, so let's run to the GFS. Lovely model that it is. The GFS, which has been the weakest and furthest west of was insisting for so long to taking a weak low into the Gulf, has finally figured out that maybe that's not going to happen. It has it tucked in near the Florida coast. The only way that happens, as I said earlier, is the fact that if it stays weak enough, long enough, where it can gain a westerly component from the low-level flow, then maybe it gets close. But if it starts to become stronger and becomes more vertical, it's going to be further to the east. And then it takes it up, makes a sharp right turn, and then moves almost straight east. It passes it northwest of Bermuda. Bermuda is roughly at 32 and about 64.6. So this is at 33 and 66.4. So it looks like it would pass about maybe 60 to 90 miles northwest of Bermuda. And if the GFS is correct, it's a Category 3. I mean, it wouldn't be a shocker if it got that strong at that point. But it will be a very, very close pass to Bermuda.
And we're talking about when now for the closest pass?
Well, this would be like Wednesday into Thursday.
Okay. All right. There's some cruise lines, and the one that I took, Norwegian, normally it takes 40 hours to go from New York to Bermuda, but now the cruise lines, they apparently are stretching that out now. Now they're actually, instead of you leave New York on a Sunday, let's say, you get to Bermuda on Tuesday morning. Now they make it Wednesday morning, and I don't know. Again, we talk about this with Dorian. If you're on a cruise line, they'll probably be making contingency plans and routes, to curve around or get away from the effects of that storm system.
Yeah, when was it? What winter was it where was it one of the Four Easters or there was one storm where the Norwegian cruise line literally sailed into a 958 low and
right.
And they said it was a surprise storm that nobody knew about it.
Yeah, exactly.
As we sat here, we got, I think, over a foot or a foot and a half of snow out of it.
Right.
That was, they ought to pay attention. Okay, so looking at the upper air, it's interesting to me how the flow across the United States really hasn't changed very much in so long. And you still have, you've got the southern end of the jet stream. This is the upper air for tomorrow morning. There's this upper low that's south of Newfoundland that's sticking out in the Atlantic. You've got that east-west ridge that goes all the way back through Texas and then comes back out into the tropical Atlantic. So, everything is moving kind of in this direction. Here's our depression. And at least for the time being, it would move toward the west. But as we go forward, you'll see how the upper air changes over time. And I'm going to leave the drawing on here so you can see where it changes to. The ridge actually splits. There's another short wave that moves through the east. This is our front for Monday.
Yeah.
And that actually is a result of what's out in the Atlantic strengthening there near Newfoundland. And Dorian just basically gets picked up by that trough. I'm sorry, the depression, or what could be Umberto. Right. The trough gets strong. It gets just strong enough where it kind of pulls it. The actual axis of that trough is already by.
Right.
So you could conceivably make an argument that if there was a weak system here, it could very well get left behind.
Look where the upper flow is taking air from. It's taking air from Great Slave Lake.
Yes.
And all the way straight down across Hudson Bay and right down, into the northeastern United States. As our old friend Alan Casper used to say in situations like this, you could almost smell the Canadian pines.
Yes. That is going to be another nice dry and cool air mass that comes in. But all of this upper pattern is just, for those of you who are looking at these things when these storms pop up, and I go back to the European from a few days ago, which might be a good idea here. Hang on one second. I'm going to see if it's still in Tropical Tidbits in their archive, because this is where we had those two runs of the European a few days ago, and everybody was kind of going gaga over this. Was it Wednesday? Let's take a look. This is Tuesday. I don't know if it was this one. You know what? I'll see it better when I put the surface on. Hang on a second. This is why you have to really be so suspicious when you look at these things. Now, here's the European just from Wednesday, where it had the low going up the west coast of Florida and into the Gulf states, and with another one to follow.
Dare I say also the panhandle of Florida and Alabama?
Correct. You can dare say it. So let's go to Wednesday night. All right, this was the one Wednesday night. All right, this was the one where it took it straight up the coast.
Right.
Okay, not only one, but then it had another one, like the parent low, and then the child low coming up right behind it. But this one went right into coastal New Jersey as a strong Category 1 or a Category 2 hurricane. The upper air, this was the 7-day forecast, so 168 hours out. This was the upper air with this. And now, when we go to the latest run, and I'm going to switch over to the GFS, but I'll at this point here, what happened is that what I just said about that trough that's out in the ocean,
Right.
It is far enough east, just far enough east, that the European was implying that the depression, or at this point tropical storm or hurricane, was going to miss that trough. It would the trough would completely bypass it, and then you'd have this big upper high building up in southeastern Canada that this thing could just kind of sort of move its way straight up the coastline. But and I'll mark it off. I'm going to mark off with my little WikiDig crayon here, as you put it. So here's your upper trough. You have another trough here in the northern plains, and we can kind of outline the jet stream flow. Okay, so it was sort of like this, and here's your tropical system, and then you've got the jet with the trough that's out in the ocean. That's way out. So we'll leave this marking on here so you can get an idea. This is what the European had, and we'll jump to the new GFS to compare the difference. And that wasn't supposed to happen. All right, let's try it again. Sorry about that. So here's your jet. I accidentally hit the erase button. So we got this.
Wish I could have done that when I was
You got
on
your
my
trough.
mother's TV.
You got that. How many lives were ruined? All right, so there's that. There's that. Now, I'm not going to erase it. I'm just going to take it off. And then we're going to switch to the GFS. And you can see the difference here. It's almost night and day in terms of what the upper air looks like.
Right.
It got the trough in the Atlantic is much stronger now as we've come closer to the time frame. You can see it fairly clearly here. The position of the storm much further to the east. The child low, if you were going to look at that, is still way back east of the Leeward Islands, because the models were developing that lead wave that was ahead of all of this stuff back for the last couple of days, and that turned out to be the big nothing. Now it's been focusing the last couple of days on the second and third wave, but you can see the difference. And look at the difference, folks, also at the ridge. Instead of pumping it up into eastern Canada, it's very flat there. There's no trough in the plains. That's still out in the west coast. So it looks like the pattern across the North America and out in the Atlantic. The Atlantic, it's fairly close, but across North America, it's much slower in bringing the necessary players that you need to have to move this up the eastern seaboard.
And what is the? You were showing the European model.
Yes.
That was from a couple of days ago, though, correct? Or
Right, that was from a couple of days ago, and that's what I left the red lines to outline what the European upper air looks like.
So now, what is it
and
look like?
behind it, we've got the new GFS for the same time frame from the current run.
Right.
You want me to compare it to what now?
The current
current European?
The
All right.
current European.
Hang on, I got to take this off. Bring up the current European, and we'll bring. Let me bring that outline back. And on the new one, the ridge still not nearly as strong. Now it's got the trough back into the plains with this sort of wrapped up upper low, but it's not as it's not as sharp,
Not as
nearly
amplified.
not as amplified. Thank you. I usually can remember those words. It's amazing when you get to be 60 or 61 or 2, and
And
the hard
brain
drive
freeze.
locks.
The brain
Yeah.
freeze, yeah.
So yeah, not as much amplitude, and the trough out in the Atlantic exerting a bigger influence, and it also the fact that the depression is maybe a couple of degrees further east initially than what it was forecast to be. Also, I think plays a big role in having this further out to the east to begin with. Shifts everything out a bit further to the east. So I don't think we have nothing to worry about here, unless there's some drastic change in all of this. If the only thing, Joe, we kind of mentioned this late this afternoon when we were talking about this. The only possibility of where it could be a little bit different is if for whatever reason this system is a little weaker, if this system maybe the depression is a little less developed, and that somehow the trough misses it, where this kind of gets left behind for a while, and then it could respond maybe to growing pressures up in Canada. But that really is an absolute long shot and purely speculative. I certainly wouldn't forecast something like that.
No, well, all the models seem to be on basically the same page for, 84, 96, 120 hours down the road, and yeah, it'd have to be some kind of an amazing change in the overall pattern over the next few days for that to take place.
So let's go to the GFS and look at the long range, because the model's been trying to telegraph changes with a trough coming into the eastern part of the United States. You see through the weekend, same old story. Jet stream from the north comes down, pulls back up. You can see the tropical system going by. Then the ridge kind of comes back up, and there's another system there that the GFS has, but the European doesn't. And the GFS has this also as a very strong storm, so I'm a little suspect that it has a Cat 2, Cat 3 hurricane here at this point, and it takes it to Bermuda. But the model in the longer range starts to drop a trough in the west, gradually swings that trough to the east, and yeah. So look,
I'm going to put on tropical storm warnings for Iceland.
Here's the thing: at this point in the long range, we're out at day 9 and 10, and we've already seen what a big difference that we have with what we had a few days ago going into this weekend. I would just suggest that the trough coming into the gradually shifting eastward, like this. If there's another system that comes into play, we may wind up seeing this change a bit in the coming days. So I certainly wouldn't look at this and say, oh, it's another recurvature. Of course, that's what the model shows you. We can all say that. But looking at this upper air, going to keep an open mind at least into early next week with regards to how this longer term pattern evolves, and if it's going to mean anything with if another tropical system were to get involved.
The Climate Prediction Center came out with their weekly 3 to 4 week probability forecast, and they have most of the country in above normal temperatures, but here in the northeastern part of the country, I think going back to the Great Lakes, they have below normal temperatures. That would be for mid to late September into early October. The only spot in the country where you see blue or below normal temperatures would be here in the Northeast. It'll be interesting to see if that does transpire. They also have above normal precipitation mostly along the eastern seaboard, except that once you get into the Northeast, I guess because of the colder projection in terms of temperatures, that kind of cuts off and it stays near or below normal for us.
Well, we could do the climate models. I did them yesterday to have the snow lovers salivating over the winter. But the CFS model, and by the way, these climate models, you really have to use them. You have to use them really carefully. They can do some really weird things sometimes, and they have predicted 10 out of the last 3 pattern changes. So just beware of that. But the model right now actually kind of goes along with what you said when you look at the mean pattern going into this is the last week of September, right here, September 27th. I'm sorry, this is the 20th to the 27th. This is the 27th to the 4th. This is the 4th to the 11th.
See, there you go.
So it is showing.
Below normal.
Yeah, for a lot of folks who have complained over the years how, fall has been an extension of summer that's lasted well into October and November, although that didn't really quite happen last year, and wanting something resembling more of a normal autumn. Maybe this year it's going to be it. I'm trying to see if they have the 2-meter temperatures, so I have to go back a couple of runs here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5. There you go. So we do transition over to, as you said, below normal temperatures here, near or a little below normal, and now we're into the week of 11 to the 18th and 18th to the 25th. So it looks like normal to below normal in the eastern half of the United States through the 6-week period.
I remember going to school in October of 1972, October the 10th, I think.
Snow.
And it was snowing.
Yes.
And
a lot of the leaves. I have a memory of that also. Seeing, living in Throgs Neck and walking one of the side streets and seeing some big flakes coming down lightly.
Right.
And also, in that memory, I remember a lot of leaves already on the ground for that early part of October.
It was cold, and we had some snow, very early snow. And you said to yourself, and back then we were, snow weenies. I don't, shy away from that. I like storms. I like to see big snowfalls. And I'm saying, boy, this is what's happening
as
now.
long as we're not working.
Just wait.
Yes.
Yeah, just wait until this winter. And what happened? That was the winter of 72, 73.
Which was nothing.
And we had nothing. I mean, we had like a grand total of 3.5 inches of snow, I think, at Central Park.
So I noticed, by the way, on one of these models, I don't know if it was the Can Sips, which is another climate model that leaves much to be desired. But November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So basically an ice age.
Well, it seems to flip, right? After December, it's right.
Yeah.
Into that cold
Meanwhile, this climate model, the NMME, for September, October, November, December, January, February. I look at this every once in a great while, and I can tell you this, in the last 3 years that I've looked at this NMME model,
right.
It always has above normal everywhere.
Right.
Always, every single month. If you look, you may find a sliver of normal someplace. So I have a very high degree of skepticism when it comes to this sort of stuff. I have always said, Joe, I have a whole lot more fun inside that 2-week time frame, watching things evolve, watching different pattern changes that are going on in the Atlantic and in the Pacific, and how it relates to our region, basically eastern PA to southern New England and everybody in between. I don't really get much out of looking at these long range things.
And you don't buy any Farmer's Almanac or Old Farmer's Almanac.
Except to see
how new ways to take corns out of your left left toe or something.
Oh God, Joseph, shameless.
So is there anything else that we could?
No. Well, let's go to the board. Let's see who has some questions. We got a very nice crowd on tonight.
By the way,
and Shelly Man Studios, thank you for hitting Super Chat. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
If any of you are in the vicinity of Putnam Valley, New York, which is right over the border from Westchester County, tomorrow in Putnam Valley, they're having their annual Oktoberfest, which begins at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, runs until 10 tomorrow night, and then from noon to 8 on Sunday. Great German food, great authentic German music. I think we have a band that's coming in from Germany. I say we because my wife is one of the directors of the German club that stages this. But it really is great, and being that my wife is one of the directors, she has gotten myself, my son, my daughter, a cousin of hers, my future daughter-in-law. So we're all going to be there over the weekend. So if you're not doing anything, stop on by. It's 11 Kramer's Pond Road in Putnam Valley, and always get a nice crowd, especially when the weather is good. And it should be good, especially on Sunday.
Agreed. Mark Glatfelter says anything interesting with the teleconnections. Well, I brought him up, and hang on one second. This was from last night's run, and for what it's worth, it has. There we go. Very interesting, Joe. Positive P&A there, Pacific North America Index, ridge in the west. Well, it also means more than just a ridge in the west. It means a few things in a few different geographic locations, including a trough at 160. The NAO actually goes negative by a bit, starting from around the 16th or 17th, and stays on the negative side of neutral pretty much right through the period. The EPO is positive, which is not, I usually like to see that negative because that's a colder look. But the positive P&A and the negative NAO is an interesting development. And I would go back to what I said a little while ago about the longer range, with the way the troughs are looking across the United States, and the trough wanting to come into the east. That maybe that's something we should look at a bit more over the weekend and early next week to see how that particular pattern winds up evolving as in relation to tropical systems. They were asking for everything tonight. Trevor McKelvey wants, let's look at the Pacific Enzo region. All right, that requires me to pull up a water temperature map. Talk about something.
Well, why don't we talk about
talk about something while I'm searching.
About the Pacific, the Dedica Oscillation, if you want.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Johnny Quest did mention. I don't know. There was a volcanic eruption in Russia in the last couple of weeks. Do you know anything about that?
No, I have not heard about any.
All right, so go back to the Pacific. I'm going to see if I can find the El Nino, the Pacific water temperatures.
For a lot of these people who point toward the so-called Maunder sunspot minimum from 1645 to 1715 and say, well, take a look at that. When we had no sunspots and we had very low solar activity, when there was hardly any solar flares going on during that period from the late 17th century into the early 18th century, we had the so-called Little Ice Age. And so there are people who claim that sunspot activity is directly correlated, low sunspot activity is directly correlated to unusual spells of cold weather. But many years ago, I spoke with Dr. Gavin Schmidt of NASA, who studies a lot of geophysical information, including what may affect our climate and affect our weather. And he said that period, the so-called Maunder sunspot minimum, has nothing to do with the Little Ice Age, that there was an unusual amount of volcanic activity going on. Now, I'm not sure how you know that. How do we know that there was a lot of volcanoes erupting between 1645 and 1715?
It's on YouTube.
Really? I'll just go and look. Take a look then.
Go on. I'm sorry.
And of course, in 1815 we had the eruption of Tambora, the volcano that eventually led to the so-called year without a summer, the year of 1816, where it snowed in every month in New England, including July and August. So,
yeah. By the way, I don't look at this map very often. I do occasionally look at the Pacific sea surface temperatures. Right along the equator there, it looks like there's a little weak out. You would look at that, say La Nina possibly, but certainly this is. If you had any thought that the El Nino was still there, it's not. If you see those little curls of cold water there along the equatorial, along the equator, that is all below average temperatures by a couple of degrees. So that is the opposite of the El Nino. But what stands out to me, Joe, and I really don't follow the weather in this part of the world, but look how cold the water is in and all around Australia. Now they're coming out of their winter. So, but that's all. These are not actual sea surface temperatures here. These are the sea surface temperature anomalies. So that's all below average water temperatures surrounding all of Australia and New Zealand, with just some pockets of warmer water.
I wish I had a better handle as to what the norm would be for this time of the year.
Yeah, that I don't know. I'm just gonna pull up the full global because a few folks were pointing this out. Now, I would just these things work until they don't, and a few folks pointing out to me lately about the fact that the water temperatures in the Gulf of Alaska are well above normal, and what would be the implications of that? Well, it could be argued certainly that that would be supportive of a positive PNA index, a ridge out in the west, and maybe a negative East Pacific oscillation, perhaps. But I would just be careful because all it takes is one or two good solid Gulf of Alaska 950 lows to upwell that water, and suddenly your anomaly is gone.
Right.
And I would also go back to a couple of winters ago where it was kind of like this, and we wound up with a trough in the west for the longest time. So
I think they call that the blob.
yes.
Of warm water, sea surface water near Alaska.
And meanwhile, much of the Atlantic is running above average, and with some big pockets of above average.
Look at that area off of Maine and Portugal, though.
Yeah, big below normal off of Portugal,
Right.
down to the Canary Islands. And I don't know if this is Dorian related, because you've got below normal pockets around Newfoundland, around Nova Scotia, and down to about Cape Cod. We've been sitting with this pocket of above normal water, right, a small area from Delaware to Long Island for the whole summer.
Right.
That seems to have been whittled away, by the way. And maybe as a result of of Dorian, you can kind of see a sliver left of below average water temperatures. But having not looked, but I could probably bet that area about a week or so ago was a lot larger, and it comes back very, very quickly this time of year. You could have a big hurricane like Dorian go by, upwell the water. Same could happen in the Gulf of Mexico, and within a week, the water temperatures are almost back to where they started from.
Right, right.
All right, so that at least answers the El Nino question. So let's come back and hang on one moment here. Chuck Cardillo says they say low sunspot activity creates a lot of high latitude blocking. Would you care to comment on that?
Well, again, the point I was trying to make was that what Dr. Schmidt, Dr. Gavin, not Dr. Smith from Lost in Space, Dr. Gavin Schmidt was trying to stress is that the solar activity may have a significant effect on the high levels of the atmosphere and cosmic rays and whatnot, but it just never penetrates all the way down to the bottom levels where you and I happen to be, which is where we're looking for, changes or shifts in, jet stream winds and impacting our local weather. So I'm not really sure whether or not solar activity does have any kind of say in our weather situation. And in fact, I mentioned the Pacific Dedical Oscillation, and that's a cycle that runs like 30 to 40 years.
Right. There was a big shift in. I remember reading about it in 1979.
Right.
So if it's 40 years, we're at 40 years.
Well, you see, the ocean has a long memory. So if it's going to shift, if the PDO, as it's called, suddenly flips from warm to cold, you're not going to see, I think, an effect on our local weather for maybe another 8 or 10 years, because the water, it's going to take time for the water to have an influence on the atmosphere. But what I'm suggesting is that if it's shifting now, or will be shifting very soon, that will take about another 10 or 12 years for the weather to catch up, the ocean to catch up, that we might see a significant cool down maybe in the 2030s. It's interesting. You look at the pattern, and during the time when it was in a cold pattern, a cold cycle pattern, that's when a lot of very reputable scientists were saying we were heading for an ice age.
Right, and it wound up being the reverse.
And then all of a sudden the PDO flipped, boom.
Right.
Went to a warm pattern. Now all of a sudden we're on global warming alert. So
right.
David, you and I may very well not see the ultimate or the flip back to.
Oh no, I'm booked.
Oh, you're booked.
I'm booked.
Okay.
I have a website to run.
All right.
David Schwartz says he's going to the Renaissance Fair in Orange County for tomorrow. And what does the weather look like for tomorrow in Orange County?
We said, late afternoon and into tomorrow evening, there may be a few showers. If you listen hard enough, you might hear a grumble of thunder tomorrow night as that upper trough pulls into our area. But if you're going, you may want to hold off and go on Sunday, because Sunday looks like the better of the 2 days. Or if you do go tomorrow, Saturday, to the Renaissance Fair, come on over to the German Oktoberfest in Putnam Valley on Sunday.
Say happy birthday to Shelly Man Studios. Apparently it's his birthday today. Happy birthday. Yeah, Johnny Quest, unlike this time, or unlike with Dorian, that cold upper low in the Gulf of Mexico goes so far up into the atmosphere, I kind of doubt it. It would really have to sit there for a long, long time, and that the top part of it would have to just deteriorate considerably. I really don't really see any kind of sign of that happening with that particular upper low. Just want to make sure we got.
Can't wait for the 2030s.
Get the crawl ready to run.
I'm sure that if it does indeed start trending toward much colder weather, by then that somebody will come up with some explanation like, "Oh, this is not a typical pattern, and we'll flip back to warm temperatures or whatever."
Joyce Mack says she wants the humidity to scoot on out of here and leave us with those 60s and 70s. At least now, and especially with the pattern we're in, it just doesn't seem like it's able to get too warm for more than a day or two before another front comes down. So after Sunday and Monday, with moderate humidity, we're going to be back to the onshore flow for at least a few days. So that's a good thing. Might have the new advisory from the Hurricane Center, so let's take a look at that. Oh, look, they're updating their tropical weather outlook, and they got X's all over the place. They haven't quite finished updating it yet, folks. Okay, so at 8 o'clock, no change in the strength. 25.6 north, 74.8 west. Moving northwest at 8, 1,008 millibars. Maximum sustained winds are 30 miles an hour. And the NOAA plane is there, so I can actually, let's see if we can get, thanks to Tropical Tidbits, if you go to Aircraft Recon, now they're on their way. They just refilled the coffee, and the bag of nuts, and oh wait, is that them? Let's see, maybe this is it. Low-level reconnaissance in storm right now, mission 4. I was looking at another plane flying out to go do something else somewhere else. All right, so they were able to close off a center, and they're flying in from the northeast right now, and we'll bring it up. There we go. Here's the current reconnaissance aircraft. Again, on Tropical Tidbits, so just go to Aircraft Recon. So on the fly-in, 1,008 millibars. If you look at the winds, the darker blue, not the dark blue. Well, the dark blue is up here in the northeastern quadrant. That's 30 to 34 knots. So they did find, unlike earlier, they did find a larger area of winds in excess of 30 knots. And the next level of blue, the slightly lighter blue, is 20 to 30. So the dark blue is 30 to 34. If it's going to be a tropical storm, you're going to have to see some of these green barbs show up, which is at least 34 to 40 knots. And if you see the bright green, then for sure it has strengthened to a tropical storm. So we're just going to have to wait for the plane to finish its work here. But it is there, and it will. By 11 o'clock, you might see them maybe nudge the winds up a little bit if they don't upgrade it to a tropical storm.
Yep. That may have something for us to look at next week, Joseph.
That is correct.
Yes.
All right, so you have plans for the weekend. I'm working at WPIX TV tomorrow night, so I will be there.
Well, you just gave me a good reason to slip out of my duties at the Oktoberfest.
Oh.
You can only.
Yes.
When you're sitting there at the help desk and you're hearing the German music, it's a wonderful German music. But after a while, you say, "I got to get out and get away from it." I'll just tell my wife. I say, "Look, I got to go home. Why you have to go home?"
I have to watch
Giaffi's on channel 11 tomorrow night. Picks 11.
Joyce Mack says, "I've got my new box of Sharpies." So I can change the maps for you, Joe. We can keep the storms safely out to sea. Okay, so what do you think? Could we call it a night?
Frank Sinatra had a song, "The World We Live In." It's amazing. Sinatra.
Everybody has a good sense of humor. That's, you know what? You got to get by day to day. A good sense of humor is definitely a big asset.
Yes, that's indeed true.
Okay. As I'm
Thank you all.
typing and talking at the same time.
And to all of you who are watching right now, those of you who got on my Facebook, my new YouTube page, my YouTube channel, Joe Rayo Weather on YouTube.
Yes.
We're up to 208 subscribers.
Oh, we got to get you to 1,000.
So I do intend to. I'm planning this weekend to add the video for my sit down with Archbishop Dolan, Cardinal Dolan, this past winter.
A must see.
And yes, a must see. Especially when he talks about, he said, little Joey Rayo grew up in the Bronx. I swear to you, Joe, that's going up. That's going up this weekend. So if
Okie AG and Erica Baker, both from the great state of Oklahoma, and semi-regulars here, and they're on tonight, which is a big hello to you. By the way, just want to say hello and goodbye to Paul Roman. Have a great evening, and all my buddies that came on earlier that didn't get a chance to say hello to, collective hello to everybody. Oh, Joyce wants me to post the link? Absolutely. All right, we'll post two things. So for those of you who want extended weather coverage, if you're weather geeky, and a number of you are already members of my weather platform on Patreon, but if you're not, there's the link to my Patreon platform. It is a subscription platform. It's just $2 a month. And you'll get so much weather. You'll have so much to read and look at. You won't have time to go outside and actually look at it.
your head will overflow.
Correct. Now to the YouTube channel for Mr. Rayo is here we go.
Oh, 207 subscribers.
Here is Joe Rayo's YouTube channel link. Fedor Ledkovsky, I hope I said that right. And I know, by the way, I noticed you on the chat lately. Last week I didn't give you a big welcome, so welcome and thanks for being here. There's Joe Rayo's link is now on the chat board. It's you got to go. You know what? When you get a little more savvy, you can actually go into your YouTube settings and create like an easy remember link.
Oh.
Like youtube.com/Joe Rayo Weather.
Yeah, that would be,
so that would be
good.
easier than going capital U, capital C, small p, etc., etc. So there's the link to that. So be sure to go to Joe Rayo's YouTube channel and subscribe to that, because we're going to get him so tech savvy that he'll be doing live streams. So then you can go watch his hour live stream. Then you can watch my 1 hour live stream. And then we'll do a live stream where we're both on together. So you just spend all your time on YouTube.
It'll be like the days of old radio with Jack Benny having his feud with Fred Allen. One would appear on one show, the other would appear on the other show, and then they'd go on their separate shows and talk nasty about each other.
Okie AG says his weather string is limp and dry, so it's not windy, nor is it raining.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good. Don't be tempted.
The weather rock.
There's a joke that goes that can go with that. We're gonna let it pass. All right, here's my schedule for tomorrow, folks. Because I'm working at Pix, I'll probably do a live stream tomorrow morning around 11:30 a.m. So for my Patreon folks, just look for you get the heads up. I'll put the time up as soon as I got that figured out. But figure between 11 and 11:30, I'll do a 30-minute or so live stream, because I won't be able to do one tomorrow night, being that I'm working at Pix. And then Sunday, probably sometime Sunday evening, maybe after football is done, I'll do a Sunday night live stream to get us up to date on everything that's going on. Plus, there'll be the regular website posts, plus the app gets updated. So be sure to download my free weather app for all mobile devices. And I think that just about covers it. So,
I think so, too.
All right, so we got...
You've only been on for an hour, right? Or
1 hour and 2 minutes.
Oh,
well, actually, we started at 7:05, so we're actually coming up on 57 minutes.
Oh, my wife would make the comment saying, like, no one would ever watch this for more than 5 minutes at a time.
Well, 82 people did.
Well, good.
Have a great night, everybody, and have a safe and wonderful weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow.